Let's talk about chore-centric construction game design. Chores are a critical part of construction games, but we don't really talk about that very much. A chore is how the player interacts with the world, how the player assigns value to things in the world and understands their place in the world, and tries to figure out where to go, what to do next. Give you an example. Stardew Valley. You manually buy seeds. You manually carry those seeds to your farm. You manually dig up the seed bed and then plant the seed. Then you manually water the seed. And then when it grows fruit, you manually harvest the fruit, manually carry it over to the mailbox, and manually mail it out for manual money. It's a chain of chores. The joy of Stardew Valley comes from managing these chores. Doing these chores tells you about the world. It tells you who you are, how you make your money, what you do in the world, and what the world means to you. And then you start to decide how to move forward. How am I going to manage these chores? Stardew Valley does not require you to do these things. There's not a task list that you must have everything checked off of. Instead, you choose how much of these you want to do. And at the beginning, the main way of choosing how many of these chores you want to do is how many of these chores did you sign up for by planting more plants. You can say that construction should be things like, stills and whatever else, wineries or houses or stuff like that. But plants are something you plant and they grow. It's part of the construction element. And every time you plant a plant, you're signing up for a specific amount of specific chores. Maybe this month you plant all the plants you can possibly manage. Maybe you accidentally plant too many plants and you actually can't manage them all. Some of them die because you just ran out of energy and couldn't water them all. But at the end of the month, you've got your cash because you went all in on doing the chores and you got your reward for doing all the chores that you chose to do. Maybe this month you don't plant very many plants because you want the free energy to go dungeon diving or fishing or whatever. You're managing your chores. Similarly, you can make really nuanced decisions, like I'm going to plant beans because that way I just do this part of the cycle and I don't have to do this part of the cycle again. Or I'm going to plant, an orchard because that way I can get around watering them. Trees don't need to be watered. I'm going to plant something that's really, really annoying to take care of, but it produces a really good yield. You get to decide what kind of chores you're signing up for. You're managing your chores. Now, obviously, there is the factor of automation. If you put in sprinklers, that will help to water the nearby plants for you. Now, maybe you're like, well, if I plant plants near the sprinkler, I'll put the plants that need water there, and then I'll plant trees somewhere else, or plants that don't need as much water somewhere else, and then I'll just handle that. Having the ability to semi-automate some part of this chore allows the chore sequence as a whole some depth, because now the player chooses differently because they've partially automated some of the tasks. But the key to automation is that you don't want it to be something that just makes chores go away. And this is something that I think a lot of building games, construction games, don't understand. Stardew Valley's success is, at least in part, because you cannot automate away all of your chores. This sprinkler does not cover your entire garden. It only covers a small amount. And in theory, you could blanket your entire garden in sprinklers, but that's like extreme late game stuff. Similarly, a lot of games would let you simply optimize this away. Yes, we've now automated the delivery system for harvesting all of our fruit and mailing it off for a profit. But this chore here is an open-ended one, because maybe you do want to sell it. Or maybe you want to give it to your friend who will marry you if you give them enough fruit. Or maybe you want to can it. Or maybe you want to turn it into wine. Or maybe you just want to put it in a big box and freeze dry it until the price goes up. It's an open-ended chore. Yes, you have to carry the fruit manually, but where are you carrying it manually? Look at all these options you have, and maybe you do want to automate it. Maybe you're going to go all in on canning, and you don't want to spend all year manually moving stuff around for your cannery. So you get a mod that allows you to do some kind of automated moving, and then you set up your cannery to be mostly automated. Because you chose to do that. The game did not make it so that that is the next step you should take. You chose which chores to manage in which ways. And this is the heart, the beating heart of all construction games. Here's an example, Dwarf Fortress. In Dwarf Fortress, your dwarves don't really do anything without your direct intervention. They won't even cook food on their own. But you can automate this, and it's free. You can just create rules. So you can tell your dwarves, yes, please cook 10 meals. Or you can say, check your meal stockpile. If it's at less than 10, then cook 10 meals. And this is just completely free. There's no price to it. So obviously you would want to automate everything, right? Just make 100 of these rules that just take care of running the base for you. But it turns out that you don't want to automate everything because automation uses up resources that might be better somewhere else. For example, I know a lot of newbies will actually kill themselves with this rule because they will accidentally use up all of their plump helmets in food, which means no plump helmet seeds and no plump helmet wine. So they run out of both wine and seeds and die. But even if you don't have that problem, you still have people coming around and saying, oh, my next task is to make more food or darn more socks or whatever you set the rule up to be. And in many cases, you need those people to be doing something that's a little bit more high priority. Like literally anything. So even in Dwarf Fortress, where the automation is free, you often don't want to automate. You often want to micromanage because you get to choose where your resources are going with a much higher fidelity. There are, in fact, some things that come automated that you may want to de-automate. For example, there is the rule where dwarves will automatically pick up all spider silk and then turn it into spider silk thread, and then from there into spider silk cloth. But you might want to turn that off because it's a little dangerous, and it means that all of your dwarves are going to be wandering around in the caverns and not doing whatever tasks you actually want them to do. So again, construction games are not about simply automating away your chores. If you can automate a chore, it should be something where that either is a proposition that requires some careful consideration, or it creates a new chore. There should never be a situation where you simply run out of chores, because chores are how you interact with the world. But at the same time, you want those chores to lead the player into realizing what's important and trying to figure out how to move forward. You don't want dead-end chores. Let me give you an example of a good dead-end chore, now that I've said that you don't want them. In Animal Crossing, you can go around the island and shake trees and pick up fruit. And you can wander around the beaches looking for seashells and all that jazz, right? Now, these can't be automated. There's no way to hire a robot army to pick up seashells for you. But you eventually just find better ways to make money, and you just stop needing to do these chores. Some people still do them, but most people stop. Most people are like, I'm not going to shake trees anymore because I don't need to. I'm above that now. These chores simply go away at some point. You just stop doing them and stop thinking about them. And that's fine, because they've already done their job. They are the chores you did when you first arrived on the island, and they're how you learned what the island was and how you fit into the grand scheme of island life. You're the one that wanders around shoving trees. Welcome to the island. So this is a complicated topic. As you can see, there are a ton of things to consider, And I think that the biggest thing to do is just to make sure you understand what chores are in your game and try and leverage that. An example of a game that doesn't do that very well would be Hydroneer. Hydroneer makes a classic factory mistake. A lot of factory-style games make this mistake. You start with a chore. In this case, it's panning for gold. You have to manually pan for gold. You will not find any gold, but you have to manually pan for things that might have some value. Eventually, you automate that, and you have these machines that do it for you. So you've got the Dirt Finder 9000, and then you've got the thing that actually turns that dirt into other useful crap, 9000. But after you've done that, there's really no reason to optimize it further, and there's no new chores. You're just done. The only new chore there could be is you have to repair these machines when they break, but that is such an incredibly boring chore that can't be opted into. You can't opt out of using machines. Now, you can opt into running these machines with a whole bunch of filters attached to the intake pipes, but then you have to repair the filters constantly. So you're still doing the same chore, you've just moved it up the pipe. This is a problem. It means that there is nowhere else for us to go. Hydroneer tries to solve this by just asking you to pull more crap out of the ground. Congratulations, you can now pull more iron out of the ground. Put in another 10 of these bad boys and get to work. But there's nothing compelling about that. There's nothing compelling about the idea of avoiding a chore more. The chore is already gone. So why would I want to make it more gone? Making numbers go up is an RPG thing, and we could talk about that some other day, but fundamentally, the joy of making a number go up is not a big part of construction games. Some people might disagree with me on that, but I find that for the vast majority of people, this is more about what you can afford to do with what you've created, rather than trying to make the numbers just go up. And you can afford to do the exact same amount with any setup. It's just a matter of how long you wait. You could even manually pan for gold until you have enough money to do everything. And of course, Hydroneer tried to get around this problem with the lack of chore depth by adding chore width. So yeah, you can automate your iron mine, and then you're like, okay, well, where do I go from there? And Hydroneer says, well, have you tried fishing? Have you tried growing plants? Have you tried cooking? It's like, well, I don't know. Those aren't really the same category of game. Why can't I do more fun mining stuff? And they're like, we couldn't think of anything to do with it. Great. Factorio is a more famous game that has a similar issue but solves it in a different way. In Factorio, everything is automation-centric. Theoretically, you can do these as chores. You can manually pick stuff up, manually move it around, and you do start off by doing some manual work, but by the mid-game, it's 100% focused on building factories. You don't want to do anything manually if you can avoid it. The chores are there, but avoiding the chores right from the start before even doing them is the point. So, for example, you might combine A and B to get C. And then after a little while, you'll unlock something new, and they'll be like, okay, well, this new thing requires 1A and 1C. And you're like, okay, well, then I'll just take this here, and I'll take this down here, and we'll get that. And they'll be like, okay, well, this new thing requires 4 Bs and 2 Ds. And you're like, okay, well, just grab this one here, hop there, and bring this on here, and then bring this in here. And it's like, okay, well, this new one requires 86 As and 9 Fs. And the idea here is that as you're building up your factory, it's getting more and more labyrinthine. In this case, the combination of constantly unlocking new things to make out of your existing streams of garbage, this requires you to constantly be trying to solve an optimization problem, because optimization gets so outrageously required at this point that you have to do it. It's not like in Hydroneer, where optimizing just gets you a bigger number. In Factorio, optimizing gets you the difference between one thing every hour and one thing every second. The scale is so radically different that it really does start to matter. This is also something you're going to find in games like Satisfactory and similar games. The idea is that they try to overwhelm your existing factory setup by requiring strange combinations of new things. I think this is fine. It's not my favorite. It doesn't have very much expressiveness to it. I don't get to choose how I'm managing the chores here in Factorio. In Factorio, you just immediately get rid of the chore as fast as possible. You don't tackle more of it or tackle less of it. You just go. And that's not as interesting to me. I like the idea that there are times when I would want to do things manually, or I'd want to change it up so I could do things manually. Maybe I'll change it out and create a new chore. Like, can I do this crafting in a volcano and now I have heat concerns? So to me, this is not the same kind of game as a lot of other kinds of games. It's not the same chore flow as in something like Stardew Valley. And I think that's really interesting. I think it's something we could talk about all day. But, it's been 15 minutes, so I guess we'll stop here.